for our comment. Don?
Pamela Brown in Washington. Thank you for that, Pamela. I appreciate it. I want to bring in now CNN investigative reporter Jose Palieri. Jose, explain to us what was the so-called communications about.
What's so odd about this supposed communication is that this Russian bank repeatedly looked up the very unique internet address of one particular computer server in the U.S. being used by the Trump organization. In the computer world, it's kind of like this. It's equivalent to looking up someone's phone number over and over again. It's looking up of contact information. So while there isn't necessarily a phone call, it usually indicates something that might be an intention to communicate. Now, that's what we heard from several computer scientists. One particular group of computer scientists who looked at this obtained these leaked internet records they were never, ever supposed to make public, and they were puzzled as to why a Russian bank was doing this. Was it trying to send an email to the Trump organization? They found themselves asking this, but they couldn't tell. Last summer, during the presidential campaign, the Russian bank looked up the address to this Trump corporate server some 2,800 times. To put that in perspective, that's more lookups than the Trump server received from any other source. So the only other entity doing so many lookups for Trump's server was something called Spectrum Health. That's a medical facility chain led by Dick DeVos, the husband of Betsy DeVos, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because Betsy DeVos was later appointed as the education secretary by President Trump. These two entities alone made up 99% of the lookups. The computer scientists we spoke to just found that weird. Now, all of the corporations involved say they never communicated by email with the Trump organization, and they had different, sometimes competing explanations for the server activity, but they haven't provided any proof of what was going on, and they don't always agree. For example, the Russian bank thinks it was receiving Trump hotel email marketing last summer, but we asked for proof, and it couldn't provide CNN with a single email to back that up. Meanwhile, the American marketing company that would have been sending those Trump emails said it wasn't doing that at the time for Trump organization. Alpha Bank, for its part, repeatedly stressed that none of its top executives have had any affiliation at all with President Trump or the Trump organization. In a statement to CNN, they said that neither Alpha Bank nor its principals, including Mikhail Friedman and Petr Avin, two top executives, have had any contact with Mr. Trump or his organizations. So, in essence, what we've got now is a potential computer link that remains a mystery.
It's still a mystery, and a lot of, this is just one other piece of the puzzle. So, Jose, I want you to stand by, and I want to bring some other folks in. I want to bring in Russia expert Matthew Rojansky, the director of the Kennan Institute at the Wilson Center, Jack Kingston, a former senior advisor to the Trump campaign, and CNN national security analyst Juliette Kayyem, as well as Steve Hall, a retired chief of the CIA Russia operations. Good to have all of you. And Stephen, I'm going to start with you. CNN sources are saying that this server activity is odd. What is your take?
It is odd, and at this point it's unexplained. I mean, until we get more information as to whether there are any packets flowing, right now all we have is just this sort of electronic handshake, if you will, between this particular server in Russia from Alpha Bank and the Trump server. From a counterintelligence perspective, on the Trump side, what you have is sort of this continuing drumbeat of, there's these incidents of contact and just encounters between the Trump campaign and team and the Russia side. And then on the Russian side, you've got Alpha Bank, which, remember, this is not the first time we've heard of Alpha Bank. Alpha Bank was also mentioned in the Steele dossier, the 35-page dossier that came out making some pretty startling accusations. So you've got this on both sides, and the devil is going to be in the counterintelligence details to tease out what exactly is the nature of these contacts and these relationships. We just don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. Congressman Kingston, when you hear that the FBI is continuing this investigation, to you, does that fly in the face of what the White House is saying, that there is no reason to believe that there's a Justice Department investigation?
Well, I think the FBI is looking into it, and I think everybody's accepted that. I think the question that the White House might have is how long have they been investigating? In terms of this computer, frankly, if the Alpha Bank was a front group for a Russian espionage or Russian intelligence agency, it would make sense. They tried to break into the RNC computers. I believe Comey said that in his testimony today. They did break into the DNC computers, and so to try to break into the Trump campaign any way they could, that could be consistent with everything else when we find out what this really does mean.
An attempt to hack, is that
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
yes, I think there's a possibility that there's
Jose?
a great explanation for
Congressman, it's worth making a distinction here. We are talking about the largest bank in Russia. This is a respected bank, and so it might be, look, it's possible that the communication that was going on here could be that hackers were trying to break in to this Trump Organization server, but I've not heard yet from any of the experts I've talked to that the bank itself would have been trying to do this. So that's we should be making that distinction.
Well, let's talk to a national security expert right now, national security perspective on this. So, Juliet, to you, what questions do you have about this data potentially connecting to Russia and the Trump Organization? Could it be a potential hack?
Yeah, but I wouldn't have put that. That wouldn't even be in my top 5. What it is, I mean, we actually don't even know at this stage, based on the reporting, whether data was communicated or if it was just a whole bunch of pings, and there might be a series of explanations. But so I just agree with Steve that I think, look, this is another data point, and what's clear is that at this stage there's just a whole lot of odd. That's what I'm going to say. It's a whole lot of odd. We tend to think of these cases as, you know, there's going to be a CSI type moment, right? This eureka moment. Someone's going to find the email from Putin to Trump, you know, proving collusion. That's not going to happen. What is happening, what we're seeing over the course of this investigation, is a whole lot of different pieces that are going to try to be put together that may lead across a spectrum from everything is benign and the Trump campaign or his people knew nothing of what was going on to direct collusion. Now, I'm not even at the direct collusion stage yet, but there's enough pieces over the course of the last 4 months that you can't sit here anymore and say, I can explain all of them away. And I think most people that's why most people want an independent investigation, or at least to have these investigations continue to try to put the pieces together.
Jose, go ahead.
You know, it is worth noting that the computer scientists who looked at this data didn't come to any concrete conclusions here. They want an independent investigation. That's why they surfaced this, right? I mean, there's no evidence that these two entities were communicating. The idea here is just that they want someone to look at this.
Before I bring
well, remember, wait a minute. Remember, they're looking at illegal information. They're looking at information that should not even be in front of them. So for us to be saying that there's some kind of fairness arbitrator is ridiculous. And also to say that the bipartisan intelligence committees of the House and the Senate can't have a thorough investigation, or the DOJ or the FBI. I think it's just partisan to always be talking and always go back to a special prosecutor, a special investigation, as if there aren't good people who can look at this fairly.
Mm-hmm. Is it illegal information? Julia?
Yeah, it was leaked. They have no, and then you also hear people say, no, there was no FISA request. Or you can't tell people if there was a FISA request or not. That's part of the deal. You could have a room of 1,000 FBI agents, and only 3 of them will know if there actually is one or not.
But I think if there is one, go ahead, Juliet. Sorry.
No, I think that's right, and I mean, I do agree with Jack. I mean, there's no reason to suspect that at least the Senate Intelligence Committee, you know, is led by people who want to come to a conclusion. I think it's interesting that after their briefings with Comey, everything does go quiet. I think there's a commitment. I would urge the White House to stop communicating with the Republicans on those committees to get them to try to spin up stories, which happened just in the last 2 weeks, because it's important for both, you know, Jack's side of the aisle and for Democrats that the American public has confidence, because once again, we're looking at this story in the context of stories coming out daily now. Mm-hmm. And as I said, it's a whole lot of odd. I mean, that's all I can say right now. There's not going to be this smoking gun, but there's a lot of evidence that's leading towards something could have been going on, and we need to come to a conclusion about it.
Matthew is the Russia expert on this panel. So Matthew, first of all, explain Alfa Bank, what it means to the Russian people, what it means to the Russian government, to Vladimir Putin, and so on.
Well, so the sheer size and significance of Alfa Bank, Alfa Group, which is a large financial holding company, this is like, you know, the Bank of America of Russia. You find their ATMs and their branches on every street corner in Moscow and across the entire former Soviet world and in Europe. I mean, they're everywhere. So the sheer size of this thing is part of why there would be many unanswered questions. It's not like it's such a narrow boutique group that finding out, they're in communication with the Trump Organization tells you what the nature of that relationship might have been. This is a bank that could have been doing a million different things. So an investigation would probably reveal a little bit more, but as Juliet says, probably not a smoking gun. I want to point out there are two things we're not doing while we're having this conversation and doing an investigation. One is developing a policy towards Russia, and two is deterring anyone from doing any further hacking, whether that's China or Iran or anybody else. It reminds me of, you're speeding along the highway, you see someone else got pulled over by a cop and is being harangued by the cop. Well, you know there's no cop waiting for you up ahead, so speed on by. And I think, that we've got to do everything at once. We've got to walk and chew gum here.